and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Exceptional Conservative Show live from Nation's Capital. I'm yours truly, the exceptional one, Kevin McClinton. This is Open Heart Closed Case Night, and we are focused this evening on election integrity in Milwaukee and Wisconsin and beyond in America. We have with us a tremendous guest with us. Of course, Karen McKim, who is the coordinator of Wisconsin Election Integrity, is with us tonight. Karen, if you would, please disclose to us what is the purposes of the Election Integrity project in Wisconsin.
It's a group of citizens, nonprofit, volunteer, nonpartisan. We formed in 2012. At that time, few people were paying attention to the cause of election security, making sure that the votes were counted correctly, especially by the computers in our voting machines. And we prioritized election audits at the time because as long as you have the paper ballots, and Wisconsin does have paper ballots,
Mm-hmm.
you can verify that the computers counted right if you look at the paper ballots. But Wisconsin wasn't doing that, still isn't routinely. And we've spent 8 years trying to get the state to adopt requirements for routine audits to confirm the right winner before election results are certified. But then in the past year, with the explosion in absentee voting, we've expanded our interest to that too, because that's another threat to making sure, what our ballots are always accurately counted.
Now, when you speak of accuracy, are you referring to the period of time that someone shows up at the polls and votes and then turns it over? Or is there something more to accuracy in the voting process?
With in-person voting, when we use the voting machines and go to the polling place to put the ballot directly into the voting machine with our own hands,
Mm-hmm.
no, that's about all there is to it, just making sure that computer is programmed correctly and someone checks to make sure it works right. But no, for accurate absentee voting, the question's much more complicated because it's a much more complicated process. It involves all the safeguards that need to be in place to make sure that the ballots get to the right voters and that the ballots get only to the right voters, to make sure the ballots get back without being waylaid or tampered with or in any the other way altered. Um, it involves all the security for those absentee ballots during the period after they arrive back at the clerk's office to the day they're counted, which is in Wisconsin, all the absentee ballots are counted on election day.
Mm-hmm.
And, you tie into the same security issues that we have with in-person ballots to make sure the voting machines counted them right.
Now, often since 1963 in the Voting Rights Act, we often heard of voter suppression. Democrat after Democrat after Democrat have complained of voter suppression. And even the request to present identification was seen as a tool, even though you could register at the DMV to get ID to drive a car, but and also register to vote, motor voter, but certainly presenting ID to vote was seen as voter suppression. I want to ask you this particular year, have you heard the Democrat Party complaining of voter suppression?
I I think that's one of their continuing concerns all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were, you know what? I don't track their complaints all that closely. um, but yeah, I think just the whole pandemic offered a new angle to the voter suppression concerns, in that if voters couldn't get absentee ballots to vote from home and felt scared of going to the polling place in the pandemic, that was often interpreted as voter suppression. The pandemic opened up a new opportunity to make absentee voting difficult and voting at the polling place dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was grossly overstated because the precautions that Wisconsin election workers and municipal clerks took to maintain safe polling places were really impressive. And
It's
it's not known very much. It didn't get much publicity because the CDC study of Wisconsin's April primary came out in July 30th or 31st, I think.
mm-hmm. Now,
The
now,
April election in Wisconsin was conducted right after the pandemic quarantine started, so the clerks didn't even have a whole lot of time to study best practices for safe in person voting. But the CDC studied afterwards and could find not a single case of coronavirus that they could attribute to in person voting in Wisconsin in
now,
April. So those polling places were safe.
exactly. So, if the CDC, which was the most looked to, Dr. Fauci, Miss Dr. Birx, uh, won't report that in-person voting is safe, then of course the narrative will get out that you have to do it the alternative way. Something has to be created so that individuals can vote. That would be the mail-in ballot. Was the state legislature responsible for mail-in ballots, or was that determined by the Secretary of State and the governor?
Um, in Wisconsin, the Secretary of State has nothing to do with elections. In Wisconsin, our state elections authority is called the Wisconsin Elections Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And no, the state legislature in Wisconsin didn't have anything to do with changing or altering or in any way, altering the state laws for elections because they basically didn't meet since the pandemic started.
Mm.
And was one of the issues I believe that made the absentee voting here in Wisconsin. There's in-person absentee and there's mail-in absentee.
Yes.
But we were trying to run an election, a big one, using state laws and guidelines and rules that had been developed back in the days when no one thought mail-in or absentee voting was going to be, even 25% of the ballots that were submitted. So a lot of the issues that you could see evolving in Wisconsin were because the laws were old and not brought up to date for the pandemic and for an election that was largely absentee and mail in.
Now, in your particular organization, over the past 8 years or so, you have been working feverishly for election integrity. What major issues have you noticed regarding the Wisconsin elections, and how are they addressed by the state?
Oh, pick a major issue. Um, no, I'm not trying to be sarcastic or dramatic or anything, but
Yes.
there's two kinds of major issues. There's technical things that affect a lot of ballots, and that's basically just the risk of those voting machines being misprogrammed. That's the biggest risk.
Uh huh.
And the worst incident in terms of election security, since I've been paying attention, was in from sometime in 2018 to sometime in 2019. The Milwaukee County Elections Management Computer, the computer that programs all the voting machines in that entire county, was left exposed to the internet, turned on and exposed to the internet for more than 12 months solid. And now
Wow.
there's no evidence that it was hacked during that time, although I don't know for sure anyone has ever checked. Um, it just goes to illustrate that the election clerks, I mean, bless their hearts, are not IT professionals. When the state elections commission, the online Milwaukee EMS computer was found by a researcher in some other state in the nation who was just checking to see if he could find elections computers online. And he did, and he notified the state elections commission, and they notified Milwaukee. And the county clerk there said that she wasn't aware that she was supposed to turn her machine off between elections. And we don't hire them because they're IT security experts. We don't.
Yes.
And we don't give them IT security staff to, watch over what they do. So that's a major issue, just that, those technical issues.
Exactly.
Bigger issue, or another type of big issue, is just the public's and the media's lack of awareness of all the intricacies of election security, all the different things that can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
When I got involved in this, I was talking to a very respected investigative reporter in the state of Wisconsin. I won't mention his name because this is an embarrassing story.
Yes.
But, I was trying to convince him to start to cover election security. And I described the problem to him, and he listened and smiled and nodded. And then after a while, he said to me, "Wait a second, you're not talking about the machines we have here in the city of Madison?" And I said, "Yeah, I am. Those are voting machines." And it turns out he was under the impression that the only voting machine was a touchscreen machine, and that if there was a machine where you marked a ballot and shoved it into the computer, that for some reason it was hand counted. I don't know.
Yeah.
That level of naivete about how our votes are counted is a very big problem among both citizens and reporters.
That's a huge problem. But you bring about the point that the county clerk in Milwaukee believes that the elections are fair and safe, even though he doesn't have the expertise in IT nor access to that. And this is their reporting tonight, Karen, because they have certified the elections. When we come back, I want to talk with you about some of the technical issues of certifying elections.
Recount is now complete. The Board of Canvassers announced the results about a half hour ago. Both candidates gained votes, but Joe Biden extended his lead by 132 votes. That brings his lead statewide to 20,740. 12 News' Matt Smith joins us live from the Wisconsin Center. Matt?
Patrick, good evening. The Board of Canvassers here just certified those results within the past 50 to 30 minutes. Here's a copy of that certification. As you mentioned, both campaigns tonight picking up votes from the election night unofficial totals. Joe Biden picking up 257 votes. President Trump picking up 125 votes. That is for the net gain of 132 votes for Joe Biden. This was a 7-day process here inside the Wisconsin Center, estimated to cost the Trump campaign about $2 million here in Milwaukee County alone. A number of these votes, a majority of them, were picked up from the 383 that were found last week during this process. On the flip side of that, tonight there are about 65 votes from election night that will not be counted and not part of the official tally. Those ballots were lost in this process in the city of Milwaukee. Tonight, election officials here in Milwaukee County talking about the integrity of their process, they say. Take a listen to the Milwaukee County Clerk, George Christensen, just minutes ago.
Recount demonstrated what we already know, that elections in Milwaukee County are fair, transparent, accurate, and secure. We have once again demonstrated good government in Wisconsin.
The counting here at the Wisconsin Center ended roughly at about 9:30. They just had a couple dozen ballots to get through. The day was spent with administrative tasks, cross-checking all of the numbers they have to ensure everything is accurate. As for the ballots themselves tonight, they have already left the Wisconsin Center by a security escort. They are back at the courthouse this evening. Reporting live at the Wisconsin Center, I'm Matt Smith, WISN 12 News.
And so we get the news, breaking news that probably rest of America won't get until Monday morning, about the certification in Milwaukee County. Now, is there anything that you picked up out of that reporting that might seem to be quite amiss in terms of the election process?
Well, a couple of things. Did you notice that the video showed the ballots being shoved back through the voting machines? Wisconsin calls it a recount when all it is just put the ballots back through the same machines. If the Milwaukee County computers had been misprogrammed to miscount the votes, they would miscount it the same way both times. And in fact, that actually happened in one county in the 2016 recount, where we went back afterwards and hand counted the votes and proved that the machines had counted wrong, both in the original count and in the recount.
Wow. So let me get this straight, because a lot of Americans say, I don't know why we have to recount. They came out with virtually the same number. It's a waste of time. Is a recount a waste of time, and is there another option that should be called upon in this hour?
No, a recount is never a waste of time.
Okay.
And we have the final results from this 2020 recount yet. Dane County is there's two counties that are recounting. Milwaukee finished today, and Dane County is expected to finish tomorrow. No, Sunday.
Okay.
But you notice that in Milwaukee, I forget if they said it in that video clip or not, but Milwaukee found almost 400 ballots, absentee ballots, that had simply not been processed. Now, that's the kind of thing that recounts always discover.
Mm-hmm.
And if we on saying every vote counts, and yet we tolerate elections where hundreds of absentee ballots are just left out by accident every election, we're being kind of hypocritical.
Yeah.
And the other thing about the 2016 election is, I used to have this number memorized. What was it? If you looked at the results and actually looked how many votes were changed between the original county certification and the final county certification in the 2016 recount, counties changed how they counted 16,680 votes were changed by the counties as they recounted their votes. Now, in the 2016, the changes were random, so they equally affected both candidates. And the sum at the end was that, I think Trump just had 281 votes more than Hillary Clinton at the end. But no, something like 0.58 and almost over half of 1% of all the votes were changed in the way they were counted in the 2016 recount. Enormous lessons were learned about the things that can go wrong in elections, and just basic quality assurance of the type that other industries, not elections, do routinely. No, recounts are never a waste of time.
But is a recount an accurate measurement of the votes that were legal and the votes that were illegal? Or is there another option that should be chosen?
Okay, well, we've already covered no, a recount doesn't ensure accuracy if you just run the ballots back through the machine. But
Yeah.
the issues that are raised in this recount, the 2020 recount, to a certain extent, the recount itself cannot decide which votes were legal and which were illegal. It's going to have to go to the courts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to happen. A lot of the time, the news has sort of skimmed over that when they're talking about the Wisconsin recounts. But from the beginning, what was going to happen is that the county was going to recount the way it thought the votes should be counted. The Trump campaign observers were going to object to some of the ballots. The county was going to certify what the county wanted to certify, and then it goes to the court to decide if the county decided correctly or incorrectly on the votes that they decided to count that the Trump campaign wanted thrown out. So the Wisconsin election results, even if you set aside all the stuff about, trying to throw the election to the House of Representatives or all that, no, simply the procedures that are there in the statutes have it that, if the recount is contested in court, the court's going to decide which votes should be counted and which shouldn't. And that's going to happen.
Now, regarding IT, did Milwaukee or did the state of Wisconsin use Dominion, Smartmatic, or Signal software for the election process?
No, Dane County. Well, Dane County and Milwaukee County, the two counties that are being challenged, they used equipment from a company called ES&S. The Dominion machines are used in Wisconsin, but not in those two counties.
Is it possible that votes could have been added or taken away? Was there a stoppage of counting in Wisconsin at all?
No, there was started counting those absentee ballots the morning of the election. They just kept going until they were done.
Okay. So, in this regard, one of the big issues that Donald Trump's campaign is talking about is the use of IT, cybersecurity, was put at, well, the elections were put at risk because foreign agitators fraudulently impacted the election through the voting machines. Is it possible that Wisconsin's voting machines could have been hacked during this election?
Yes, it is always possible that computers, no, any kind of computers, not just voting machines, are hacked or accidentally misprogrammed, or that they malfunction on election day. That's always a possibility. They're computers. They're programmed by humans. They can be misprogrammed by humans. And no, the individual voting machines do not need to be connected to the internet to be manipulated. The software comes from these huge companies. ES&S and Dominion are the two big ones in Wisconsin. And the voting machines themselves are serviced by these companies, and the local election clerks can't oversee what the service technicians are doing to their machines. You might have heard the story from ES&S. A couple of years ago in Pennsylvania, their technicians were installing unauthorized remote access software into the voting machines. The technicians said they were doing it for their own convenience, but the clerks had no way to know. They can't oversee the technicians. So, yeah, always a risk that the voting machine be misprogrammed. And again, that's not scandalous. That's not surprising. That's just the way computers are. And we have to learn to manage them responsibly.
Now, as you're an expert in this particular field, certainly not I. I am certainly one of the neophytes when it comes to this. But in terms of elections, with the threat of cybersecurity issues, computer errors, things of that particular nature, did the state make any attempt to upgrade access to technology to deal with the technology issues and risk that would happen during an election prior to the election?
No, nothing out of the ordinary. They always perform pre-election voting machine tests, but those can't detect hacking. If anyone was going to hack the machines, they would make the hack not activate until election day, until real votes were counted. And but I want to go off on another point here, is
Yes.
that actually technological security is not possible. There's no way our election clerks are ever going to be able to secure those computers well enough to prevent every election day miscount. The only way to secure the election results is to keep those hand-marked paper ballots and audit them after every election day to make sure that the voting machines identified the right winner. That would secure the results. It wouldn't prevent every election day miscount, but it would certainly fix the miscounts before the results were certified.
Are the poll workers trained in this regard, dealing with the technology? They're standing right there at the machine. They should know how to work the machine. Should they also be aware of any threats in terms of voting machines and things of that nature?
That's it. Again, that's just not possible. I saw the number once. Maybe 45,000 poll workers in the state of Wisconsin, and we don't have that many trained IT people in Wisconsin. Probably. I don't know. No, they're very naive about IT. Some of the worst miscounts in Wisconsin's history were because poll workers, the voting machine was trying to reject a ballot it couldn't read, and the poll workers didn't know how to handle that, so they pushed a button on the back of the machine to get the machine to kind of eat the ballot, and they didn't even know that made the machine just not count the votes. And there were numerous incidents like that back when a machine called the Optic Eagle was used. And no, they're just naive. Right now, I'm involved in another issue with the State Elections Commission. There's a certain kind of voting machine that prints ballots called the Express Vote, and the voters use a touchscreen to indicate their selections, and then a ballot gets printed out. But on that ballot, the votes are encoded in barcode that the voters cannot read. And there's a list of candidates underneath it. They're supposed to read that to verify their vote, but that list of candidates is never counted. It's the barcode that's counted as the votes.
Wow.
And this past election, I visited a bunch of polling places in the city of Madison, and, during a lull in the action would ask the poll workers or the head poll worker to explain to me the ballots. They didn't even know the barcodes were on the ballots, never mind that, the barcodes were the votes, and none of them was aware that the voters should have been instructed to put the ballots back in the machine, to have the machine read the barcode back to them. Not that that's really good verification anyway, but it's at least what the manufacturer recommended. They didn't know that. And again, they just don't know IT.
Now, Donald Trump was called a racist for pinpointing Milwaukee, Detroit, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Phoenix, and Reno in Las Vegas as potential hotspots for errors in voting. Is that racist, or is that just an observation of past history regarding fraud?
I'm not a mind reader, and I can't see into people's hearts.
Yes.
I do not use the word racist. There's no question that Donald Trump challenged the areas where the Democratic votes are the thickest. I think Dane and Milwaukee County together voted something like 72% for Donald Trump. And I think that's why the Trump campaign targeted those two counties. I can't say whether it was racially motivated or not.
Yeah. Now, would it be a wise choice if they are the riskiest regarding past fraud in elections?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would have been a wise choice. There's no way I'd ever try to verify the results of a Wisconsin election and leave out Dane and Milwaukee counties.
Exactly. No. So there are 3 potential lawsuits, and maybe more coming because of Sidney Powell to Wisconsin. But I want to deal with the 3 cases right now and give you an opportunity to explain to the American people what's happening. And we all know that the courts are always open, so there's always an opportunity for more cases. Kind of like the pandemic, there will always be more cases. So, if you could, the 3 cases that are currently there under the Trump campaign.
Well, the Trump campaign filed one petition at the beginning of the recount to say why they thought these 2 counties should be recounted, and what they wanted, why they suspected problems in those 3 counties. And those 3 issues, I think, are. I'll tell you, I was impressed when I read that petition for the recount. Yeah. They cited specific state statutes, and they cited specific conduct that they alleged was in violation of those statutes. Those 3 questions were, I'll start with the weakest one, that the clerks, the absentee votes submitted in Wisconsin are supposed to have the signature of a witness, and the witness is supposed to write their address on the absentee ballots. That's clear in state statutes.
Yes.
It's also clear in state statutes that if the witness address is missing, the ballot cannot be counted. Third, it's clear in Wisconsin statutes that the remedy, if the address is missing, is to return the ballot to the voter so the voter can correct it. Now, it was no secret at all that during this election, the clerks, when they were getting those ballots back and they noticed the witness address was missing, if they could read the name of the witness, they could look up the witness's address in some city records and fill it in themselves. Now, this was only open. They weren't trying to hide it. In fact, a lot of times they were careful to use red ink or initial it to make sure that it was recorded that they had changed that they had added the address. Yeah. Now, is that fraud or is that not fraud? That's up to the court to decide. The State Elections Commission and the former Attorney General had both issued opinions that that was an okay practice, but it's never been tested in the courts. The legislature never amended the law to say it was okay. So all those challenged by Trump, saying, the state statute is clear what should have happened in those cases. It's clear that the clerks didn't do that. Do we throw out the ballots or not? That's the first issue. No one knows how many of those ballots there are. The second issue is the one that affects the most ballots, something like 170,000 ballots in both Dane and Milwaukee County. And that's the fact, again, state statutes require, and the Trump campaign cited the statute, that absentee ballots have to be requested in writing. There's several ways in Wisconsin that voters were allowed to request absentee ballots without submitting a written application. They could go online and request an absentee ballot, or they could show up in person and orally say, please give me a ballot. I'm this voter and here's my ID. And they were given ballots after oral requests and after online requests, but there's no written application for those absentee ballots on file. Now, that requirement has a good reason related to fraud. You want to have the voter's signature on file, so that in case there is a question about the absentee ballot they submit, there is a signature to compare it to. Wisconsin doesn't require routine signature comparison, but it's there as an option if there's a problem. But all those ballots without written applications don't have signatures on file either. And so the Trump campaign challenged all of those, 170,000 ballots in those two counties alone. Now, whether the court's going to uphold that challenge or not is a little iffy because it has two problems with it. One thing, the remedy of throwing all those ballots out is generally seen to be unfair because the voters were acting in good faith. The processes for them to vote absentee were very clear, very well publicized. They did what they were told was okay. And so there's one legal argument that the voters are innocent and the remedy is not to throw out their ballots. The second argument is that if the Republican Party or Trump campaign thought that this was a bad practice, they should have challenged it before the election and not after. If that's a timeliness argument. No, your remedy isn't to throw out this election. Your remedy is to fix it for the next election. And on those two grounds, it seems to me likely that that challenge will fail. But the third challenge is the interesting one from any view, I think. There's another, Wisconsin requires voter ID. You have to show an ID to get a ballot.
Yes.
And absentee voters do that by submitting a digital image of they can take a picture of your driver's license with your camera and submit it online, or, there's a couple of number of ways you can do that. Well, when the pandemic hit and everyone started, wanting to request absentee ballots, a lot of voters were having trouble submitting a digital copy of their ID. And so, but the statutes had this other thing in it that if you were an indefinitely confined voter by illness, I can't remember the three things
Yeah.
Disability. You didn't have to submit a voter ID. They were exempt from that requirement as absentee ballots. Well, so the Dane County clerk got on his Facebook page and basically told all the voters in Dane County, if you don't want to submit a voter ID with your request for an absentee ballot, just check that box that says indefinitely confined, and you'll be able to vote without an ID. Now, this was back in March. Yeah, this was back in March. The Republican Party immediately took that to court and said, no, that's not the purpose of the statute. That's not, what the Elections Commission guidance says. You can't have, voters just checking in indefinitely and get over their voter. Well, the Supreme Court at that time unanimously decided that the Republican Party was right about that and that ordered the Dane County clerk to stop saying that. But the genie was out of the bag by that time. And as a result, it appears that in this election, there were 68,212 ballots submitted in Dane County and Milwaukee County where the voters claimed indefinite confinement. And those votes are being challenged by the Trump campaign in court now. The Milwaukee County already decided, no, we're going to turn down that challenge and we're going to count those ballots. And again, the Dane County is going to finish up on Sunday, but that's the clerk who issued that instruction in the first place. So they're going to uphold it. But it's going to be challenged in court. And again, remember the two things I said that could make a challenge not be upheld? The Republican Party didn't challenge it on time. Well, they did. They challenged this one back in March. And the thing is, were the voters just innocent, just doing what they'd been told to do? Well, no. The Supreme Court decided back in March that just claiming indefinite confinement was not a good enough reason to request an absentee ballot without a voter ID.
Yes.
So I think that one's the most interesting one. It affects, I don't know what, oh gosh, 10, 20 times as many. I can't do math in my head that quick. Yeah. 3 times. It affects 3 times as many ballots as it would take to switch Wisconsin into Trump's electoral vote column. I see no reason why the court would not uphold the Trump campaign's objections. And so that's the one I'm watching most closely to see what happens.
Now, number one, does the Supreme Court have the political as well as legal moral strength to, quote unquote, what the left will say, disenfranchise nearly 70,000 voters by casting out their ballots? What is your thought on that?
I don't know. All I can say is, I just look at the law the way I hope the court does. Just look at the law, look at the facts, and say, were those ballots legally cast or were they not? Mm-hmm. And I do think that the court has the sense to do that. What others will say about their decision is, I hope they don't take that into concern. I hope no court takes that into concern. They should all look at the law and the facts and decide straight. So, yeah.
Wow. There's a lot coming up in the next few weeks, and you have been very gracious with me because this was supposed to be a 30-minute interview. It was turned into almost an hour, but you know I got a ton of questions regarding this particular election. How can people who want to help make elections more integral in Wisconsin get in contact with you?
We have a website, wisconsinelectionintegrity.org. It's spelled just that way, Wisconsin Election Integrity, mashed together with .org. And there's contact information on that website, plus a lot of information about issues in Wisconsin and solutions for Wisconsin.
We're going to be calling on you next month to come back on the program because we're not through with this. And this to be honest, the American people have not been told that really it's not December 14th. That's when the Electors College comes together and they would love to have all these things certified. But it's January 6, 2021, when the Congress has the right to determine if the certifications are accurate. And the Senate can then make its own decision in terms of going to the states and asking for the legislatures to demand the electors given to them by their House of Representatives. So there are a lot of little turns here, and we're going to be calling upon you, Karen, for advice and counsel out of Wisconsin. We want to thank you so much for being on the air with us tonight and wish you the happiest of Thanksgiving weekends to you and yours.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Karen McKim, ever so patient with me with all of my questions. We will be calling upon her in the not too distant future. People always ask me, Ken, why do you stop at this particular hour of the night? It's very, very simple. I literally have to ask you two basic questions. Number one, do you know where your children are? Number two, do your children know where you are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?